Hi everyone, I'm here with Wayne Brown today. He's a Senior Director for Financial Services at Alvarez and Marsal. Wayne, it's great to see you again. I hope you've had a good year.
Yeah,
I just wanted to suppose you just use this time just to say, how have you sort of seen 2022 and sort of a bit of a summary of how you think it's gone?
it's been a heck of a year, hasn't it? 22. There's so much happened
Yeah.
in this year, and I think that three things. I mean, one is was the explosion in crypto, and we can just unpack that a little bit. The second one is the change of focus among VCs in particular around fintechs and their focus from
Mm,
moving the focus from growth to profit. And then the last is just generally the changing environment, how quickly it's flipped, and now in a
mm,
completely different macro environment. So let's just kind of just they're the three takeouts really for the year. So I think the first one with crypto, I think probably this time last year everybody wanted in, and I
mm,
think really it's been found out that all that glitters isn't gold. I think there are good use cases for
mm,
crypto. Don't get me wrong. I think blockchain is got
mm,
great use cases, and I think that there are some good use cases for crypto. But too many people piled in, just like anything that's new and shiny. You get a speculative bubble,
mm,
and then bad things happen, and we're starting to see bad things happen in the crypto space. So I think that's the massive change from where we were last year. Um, the second thing, and kind of linked to that, is the change of perspective around fintechs. And I suppose just technology startups in general, but obviously I'm FS background, and my focus is on fintechs, and clearly a change of emphasis and investor sentiment from growth to profitability, and now we're
mm,
seeing an array of fintechs starting to think about, do I have good runway? What's my burn rate? Can I see a route to profitability in a way that they perhaps didn't have to before? Many of them didn't have to. Let's say that they
mm,
were let off the hook, and certainly from our perspective, we're getting more and more involved in fintechs that want to think about M&A, or other businesses that want to get involved,
mm,
and perhaps want to think about buying a fintech or partnering with a fintech, because great expertise in there, great technology in there, great idea in there, but that route to profitability was probably longer
mm,
than now the environment is letting them. And then lastly, on the environment, I mean, just generally speaking, we've seen, obviously a drastic change in the interest rate situation, which for banks, changes the emphasis of where their profitability lies, and changes the emphasis of what focus they need to place on their cost base, but also
mm,
generally the macro environment changes how they need to work with consumers. And what we'll see probably over the
mm,
going into 23, and we start to see now, but certainly into next year, is banks that have really worked hard on their forbearance processes and their collections process. I mean, you'll know this better than anybody, Chris, that they'll be at an advantage of some of the newer banks that have perhaps not been through one of these squeezes before,
mm.
and they don't have that traditional skill base. So I think it's going to be really interesting now as we see this change in environment. I really do think that those banks that have been through the wire with the regulator over the last 5-6 years around collections and etc. will be in a much better and stronger position than some other providers. But yeah, I think they'd be my three takeouts for 22.
Do you think the change of interest rate, I mean, that must affect the investment environment for fintechs as well? So, I mean, sort of like the fact that interest rates are higher, I mean, it changes like the return that people are looking. I mean, is that sort of all flowing through?
Oh,
And it flows through to even like business costs, doesn't it? And then inflation.
yeah, totally agree. It flows into the multiple of what investors should be
Mm,
expecting when they can, they know what they can get from just investing in gilts and bonds.
mm,
Like, that's the starting point, and everything flows from that.
mm,
So when the interest rate goes up, it increases expectation of the multiple across the board. So yeah, we definitely see
Yeah.
that from an investor perspective.
Yeah, I mean, for me this year felt like almost like two halves. And you had the first half of the year, which was we were sort of carrying on really from the pandemic, and the second half of the year, where it seems like it feels kind of different. So do you think it's almost like the optimism that we've had over the last 5 years is sort of like changing into realism, and that's sort of how it sort of like we shifted over this year? I mean, is that how you kind of see it? I mean, is that what you kind of think around 2023 as well?
That's a really interesting perspective. I certainly think there's a lot of things come home to roost in the second part of 22. A lot of the decisions which were made, many of them with with the right the right spirit, have consequences, and nonetheless, those consequences have sort of have come home. I think it's a very good point to think about it as two halves, and how different it's been in the second half to the first half.
Yeah, what's your perspective for 23?
Yeah, 23. I think there's some really interesting things going to happen in 23. I think, first of all, if metaverse was the sort of buzz phrase for 22, I think AI, in particular generative AI,
Mm.
is going to be the buzz phrase
Mm.
for 23. You might have already heard about some bits and pieces around that, and it's really intriguing.
Mm.
And I think AI in FS is going to be
Mm.
intriguing, particularly in relation to the new legislation around consumer duty, and what can it
Mhm.
do in terms of interpreting big sets of data to help banks create products, create services that will be able to service customers in the right way, which is precisely the regulation. I think we will start to see open finance really mature. I mean,
Mm.
we sort of say it every year, but I really do hope that this year we will see it.
Mm.
And I think that there are now different use cases for using open finance data in really interesting and usable ways that perhaps there weren't before. And one of those might be the income and expenditure
Mm.
check and collections and other bits and pieces like that, or alternative routes to underwriting in a different way. So I really do think that might be something we see. It seems the race for a super app in the West is really hotting
Mm.
up. We see in China, obviously it's huge with WeChat and others, but in the West we've never really cracked it. Revolut's having a go.
Mm.
Tinkoff in Russia's
Mm.
having a go. And if I'm honest, I kind of have a sneaky feeling that that's what Elon Musk is up to at Twitter as well. But
Yeah. Yeah.
so sooner or later, I think that will happen. Green finance, despite the current economic climate, is not going to go away, and we'll
Mm.
see we'll see an increasing need for good quality data there, because it's very easy to be accused of
Mm.
greenwashing. So you need excellent
Mm.
digital and data capability to be able to evidence your supply chain and where you're investing your money. So I think that's the
Mm.
thing. And maybe the last thing, I think that hybrid working, it's now obvious that it's here to stay. And I think that maybe 22 we were
Mm.
saying, is it? And I think now as we head into 23 we say, yes, it
Yeah.
is. And what does
Yeah.
that mean? And from a digital perspective, which is where I play, I think it means a lot in terms of collaboration and the way that work is actually done. Is we're going to see
Mm.
that come to the fore a lot more.
Kind of saying it sounds like we've gone from almost like these big ideas, like the metaverse was the big idea last year, and we had these visions, almost like these visionary ideas, and now we're sort of talking about the practical applications of ideas that maybe even came the year before, and so we're now into almost like a doing mode. So next year is going to be a doing year. How do we do that to create profitability? Whereas in the previous years we were in this sort of expansion, sort of visionary kind of mode. I mean, do you think
Absolutely.
now's the time to sort of maybe invest in these things sort of in a small way, because now the technology is understood, because in 5 years' time they actually might become bigger, and that's when we really see the growth,
Yeah,
like we did with digital.
there's 2 points you made there. So one is, I think, is around kind of where does people spend innovation spend. The second one is what will happen in the metaverse.
Hmm.
On the first point, I mean, let's face it, some businesses are just going to stop innovation spend. It's a huge mistake. What they should be
Hmm.
redirecting innovation spend to practical, tangible things. To your point, actually taking
Hmm.
action. So actually doing things that are going to affect, that improve their customers next year, or improve their cost position next year. So that, I think that you're quite right. We'll start to see some tangible focus on real things.
Hmm.
And then the second part in the metaverse. I mean, I'm a big proponent of the metaverse, as you know, and I do think that is the future of the internet. Um, but like all new things, it gets hyped up, and I think that last year
Mm,
was the hype year, and people perhaps got carried away in one or two
mm,
areas. But I really do believe that is the future of the internet. Uh,
mm.
how and where people invest their money is people need to be just kind of careful where they do it. Probably get into it in a sensible and smaller way, just testing it out. I mean, maybe
Mm.
start out internally thinking about their induction programs or their training programs, and they can start to bring their own staff in before they start to widen it out. It doesn't all have to be about the
So,
headset
I mean,
either.
do you
It
think?
can be wider stuff than that as
Yeah.
well.
I mean, there's a certain sense even around sort of digital, right? So if you'd been investing in digital sort of 5 years ago, or you mentioned even around the banks looking at forbearance plans and the systems that went around that. I mean, if you sort of, we're all sat there almost saying like, if we did this 3 years ago, we'd be in a much better position now. I mean, and you're saying like, well, some of the people who've done that, you think they're going to be a good position for next year. I mean, is that not true with some of these other technologies? You don't have to spend a fortune, you just have to keep your toe in the water to kind of stay ahead to a
Precisely.
certain extent.
Yeah, precisely. I think you just need to be
Yeah.
much more discerning in in where you place your investment, and
Mm.
also need to be much more open-minded about engaging with the wider ecosystem. So, you know,
Mm.
there are plenty of fintech players out there that would be willing and ready to partner with businesses to in many of these areas. They don't have to be it's something that they do
Yeah.
themselves. But yeah, quite rightly, as you point out,
Yeah.
that they're the ones who maintain a level of investment will be the ones who get the payoff in 2 or 3 years' time.
Aren't it? But it does sound like next year is going to be a very sort of practical sort of go and do things kind of year. And so I mean, I suppose we'll see how it sort of plays out. So I mean, Wayne, thanks very much for making the time. I appreciate it. I know it's very busy at the end of the year, so I appreciate making the time.
Hey, it's been great. Always good to chat, Chris. All the best.